Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with the one and only Mr. Jonathan Twombly. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Michael. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, man. All I got to say, as you people will see in video number one, is that what you and I have been waiting for is right in front of us. So we both are really excited. We got dry powder. We're building relationships, and we're confident enough to execute when everybody else is scared. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and this is a bit, in a sense, it's kind of a continuation of the first segment. Just sort of corroboration from the big guys that what we've been talking about is right. I mean, so there are a couple of things sort of crossed my screen in the last few days. One is in the most recent issue of The Economist. I mean, I still get this thing delivered to
Yeah,
me.
you actually still get the magazine.
I like to read a piece of paper, right? So,
Yeah.
and so this article is called "The New Rules." You probably can't see the subheader, but it's investing in an era of higher interest rates and scarcer capital. And the thing that I wanted to point out about this article is that we've been talking about all these people who have come into the market as investors since 2008, right? I mean, the last 14 years, it's an entire generation of investors, right? And they only know a low interest rate environment, and they're freaking out right now because things are not normal, right? Because of course, like, normal is all a matter of perspective, right? If you know nothing other than low interest rates, you think that's normal. It's like the fish doesn't know it's in water, right? So,
Right.
um, the last paragraph of this I want to read to you.
Okay.
But oh well, actually, so I want to actually, there's a couple things I want to point out about this article that I think are really intriguing. And I'll get to this last paragraph. But so it talks about these. There's like three essential things that you got to understand in this market environment. So one is that expected returns will be higher. Right now, this doesn't make a lot of sense to people because they think, oh, the market's going to be down. That means expect returns are going to be lower. This is counterintuitive, but it's actually the opposite, right? When you're investing, when everybody else is investing at the same time and you're at the top of the market, well, yeah, everybody is expecting higher returns because they're just expecting the present to continue. And actually, what they're expecting is for the past to continue, because what they're seeing is people monetizing gains that they made on investments that they made when the market was lower, right?
Correct.
But they just extrapolate and think it's just going to continue this way. So if they buy now, they'll get the same return 5 years hence. But history actually shows that that's actually not the case at all. And for the last couple of years, I've been seeing sophisticated investors projecting that the returns for the decade of the 2020s will be lower. And the basis of that idea was, well, we're already at the top, right? They will be lower, right? They can't go higher from here. Mm-hmm. Now that the air has been let out of the bubble, you're actually seeing the opposite, which is people saying returns will be higher again. It all depends on when you get into the market. That's the key thing. When you get into the market is what is going to determine your returns. Now, what is really interesting is that this article also points out something. It sort of articulated something which I sort of was intuiting, but never really couldn't figure out to put into words. Let me find it. So it's let's see, where did that go? Let's see. Okay. I'm sorry, but where did that go? Well, basically the idea, I can't find it in the article right now, but the idea is that when you have a low interest rate environment, you're essentially your current returns, i.e. your cash returns, are being translated into capital gains at the end, right? And so what's happening now is the opposite, that capital gains are going to fall, but current returns are going to rise. So you're going to get more cash flow out of your deals. And this is a great thing if you're a real estate investor. Why would you want to defer all of your money from these deals to some uncertain point in the future that might never arrive, right? And that is exactly the situation that we are in now, where for the last several years, investors were trading cash on the barrelhead, money in your pocket, for the prospect of huge gains in 2, 3, 4, 5 years,
Right.
when they sold, and that was entirely dependent on current market conditions continuing. Cash flow is different. You lock in the cash flow when you buy, right? There may be some fluctuation, like if there's a recession, it may soften a little bit, but essentially, if you buy at a high cap rate, you're locking in, and probably you're locking in a floor for cash flow,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because your NOI is going to grow and you're going to get more cash flow over time. That's how it used to work. However, because of cheap money, things flipped on their head and every market became an appreciation market, right? But that always assumed that this was going to continue forever. Now, just as an aside here, there used to be certain markets, and you and I both live in them, that were always considered appreciation markets. And that was because over a very, very long period of time, that was borne out, right? There was intense population pressure on a very limited amount of essentially land, right? And you knew that that kind of pressure was just going to continue to drive appreciation. So that's why people were willing to trade current cash flow in the form of low cap rates for future growth. But the other thing is to remember is that cap rates were relatively stable over long periods of time too. There was some fluctuation in the cycle, but it was fluctuations of a couple of points. It wasn't like the kind of swings we've had. You had these other markets where you couldn't count on that kind of appreciation because you could easily build, right? So there's new supply constantly coming on the market that kept your appreciation, prospects relatively muted. But the return for that was that you were buying at a high cap rate and locking in nice cash flow. And you could buy a couple properties and retire from your job with that. But you can't retire on capital gains, right?
Right. Exactly.
So now we're going back to an environment in which savers are rewarded, cash flow investors are rewarded. It's a safer environment. It's a better environment as far as I'm concerned. So, but people have to do a mental flip now.
Yeah. I think what you're highlighting here is, and you sent me an article on this as well, but Howard Marks.
Yes.
Right. He was in the news a couple of days ago, talking about a sea change. And I think you're absolutely right. And where we're going, from my opinion, is a market that was very much like the .com era, where there was something that could do no wrong and everybody piled in, and I don't know what it was, 90% of them went to zero when you actually had to perform. Some of them, Amazon, whatever they were, that came out of it, but most of them blew up. And this sea change, at least the sea change is around debt and savings. And I think you're absolutely right. Debt's gonna, it's gonna get to a more normal level. That's going to cause assets to be repriced because the risk profile has changed. And you, as a equity investor or someone with cash, you're going to have real choices, right? There'll be a time where you get 2 or 3% in your savings, probably, right? 2% certainly, not zero. You're going to have real decisions and opportunity costs and all of those things. So I'm excited, but yeah, you're right. It's going to be such a mental shift for a lot of investors. I don't know that they're ready for it. I don't know that they're ready.
And that's kind of a good lead into the last paragraph of this article, which I wanted to read, which is, it says a cohort of investors must get to grips with the new regime of higher interest rates and scarcer capital. That will not be easy, but they should take the long view. The new normal has history on its side. It was the era of cheap money that was weird.
Yes.
Right?
I love that. Yeah.
And so the problem is that a whole generation of investors only knows the weird times, which they think is normal. And that's one reason why a lot of them are having a very difficult time processing this. And they think the sky is falling, right? They think the economy can't survive with higher interest rates, but it did forever, other than the time that you've been actively engaged. So if you are younger, and if you're watching this podcast and you are younger than Michael and I want you to take a lot of hope in the new environment. It's a better environment. It is not an environment that rewards speculation. It's not an environment that rewards people who are just good at raising money. It rewards people who are cautious and good at
Good
investing,
operators. Yeah.
good operators, and people who want to be rewarded for saving money and don't want to view investments as a casino, right?
Yeah,
So
what I would tell a young investor today is I know it feels different. I know you got burned here and there. I know you are going to suffer some losses. And that's because you were gambling, right? If you looked yourself in the mirror, you went to the gambling table because you thought it was easy and everybody was winning. And that's just not how it works long term. But I will tell you this, real money, real money is made in a recession.
yeah,
Real money is made at the pivots. And if you can lift your head up and realize that you can make life changing, there'll be a couple of deals done that are life changing for folks. They'll take years to play out, but they'll be awesome. There'll be some real assets sold at distressed prices, and I look forward to getting my at least one.
yeah. I mean, and so if you're younger, if you don't remember the great financial crisis, or frankly, Michael and I are old enough to remember financial crises before that one even.
Yeah.
So we've been through this a few times, in
Yeah.
our conscious memories. The thing that you should really understand is that, well, actually, not that you should understand. I feel a little bit bad in the sense that what you have been told is investing has actually been gambling, right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
So I don't want. So it's not your fault necessarily, right? But you grew up in this environment in which that was what was investing, right? And
Yeah.
and we're going back to kind of time and time worn truths, like you invest for cash flow, not appreciation. That was always the
Yes.
when Mike and I were coming up. Like, you invest, appreciation is the icing on the cake. You invest for cash flow. Don't even think
Yes.
about it,
No,
right?
it's the only number that matters on my spreadsheet. I call it yield. You call it return on cash, cash on cash. I don't care.
And,
I call it a yield. Everything's a bond to me. Every rental I have is a bond.
and
What's it kicking off?
And the reason for that, though, I want to really emphasize the reason for that is because that is how you de-risk
Yeah,
your
I can hold for, dude. My market could fall 50%. Wouldn't matter.
yeah.
Wouldn't matter.
If you're not investing for appreciation, you don't have to worry about changes in the market as much, right? You just set it, you don't set it and forget it, but I mean, you're just not,
Yeah.
it's just not, all of your eggs are not in that basket, right? You're getting an adequate return on your money. And the thing, but in this low interest rate environment, there hasn't been any alternative for people. They couldn't put their money in
Yeah.
bonds.
Let me throw this out at you for a minute. So you and I both saw a lot of what I'll call new syndicators come in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And let's just say the number's 100. I suspect over the next 2 years, greater than 50% of them, so greater than 50, bust out and won't be syndicators by 2025 or 2026. They'll just be out of the business. They will have lost a lot of money, the reputation. They will think the game's rigged or whatever. Um, and I think that's a great thing. I think, again, I talk about running the other way. I told you this a year or two ago. I go to meetups and speak because I want to know what the audience is doing. I think this was 2020 in the Silicon Valley. It was 2020 in the Silicon Valley. I did a meetup where I was a speaker. And 80% of the people that asked questions were brand new syndicators because, hey, I'm a tech employee. All my friends got RSUs or stock. They all got this money, don't know what to do with it. I'm going to syndicate a part. Like, I'm going to go to Tennessee or Ohio. And I'm like, you're going to buy an apartment? How many times you been there? Never. I can do it all online. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? What are you doing? So that's why I ran the other way. Those people are going to bust out and not be back. So 50% of syndicators gone by 2025. What do you think?
It could happen, and I'll tell you another reason why. It's not simply that the appetite is going to go away, but there are going to be a number of sponsors who will not be able to get debt again. And the reason is
Exactly.
because they will their projects will have blown up, they'll have been taken back by the banks, and they'll get blacklisted. So there's going to be some people who, unfortunately, are going to be basically out of business
Well,
unless.
they're not only going to not be able to get debt, they're not going to get equity. I mean,
Well,
who's
no,
going to
that's what I'm
believe them
saying.
next time? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean but even if they can find you can always find new
Oh,
investors, right?
that's true. Yeah.
But if you can't find new
Debt. Yeah.
like you can't find the new debt when you get blacklisted by like Fannie and Freddie or whatever. So the and even some guarantors, frankly. I mean, this is something that I was never really conscious of because I don't serve as a guarantor for other people's deals. But in the last couple of years, I heard people talking very seriously about not wanting to be a guarantor for there. For a while there were people who were basically like, "Hey, I will guarantee anything," because they were looking at this as like relatively low risk and a way to make a lot of money fast with little downside.
Yep.
And I think it started dawning on some people at a certain point that there was actually some downside associated with this, which was not necessarily losing your money, but being associated with a bad deal for in the bank's eyes. And so you could still come out fine and not lose a thing, but the banks would be like, this guy guaranteed this bad deal, and then we're not going to, we're not going to lend to a deal with that guy on it anymore. So a lot of the guarantors I saw started getting a bit more concerned about who the operators were, right? So it can happen that way too. You may find that one of your deal is fine, but you're the guy who's been giving you his guarantee for the last 5 years now can't do it anymore because another deal that he was in blew up and now he's blacklisted. So capital is going to be constrained for a while, but again, that means that for the people who were in the game, who didn't get taken down by bad deals, there's just going to be that much less competition. And we don't even really have to even wait for, doesn't have to be a big crash for this to happen. Just enough deals that just kind of go sideways. And there's going to be just a lot less competition out there. And again, when we get into that herd mentality thing, all those people who rushed in when, because multifamily seemed like a no-brainer and risk-free money, the minute of it they encounter any adversity, they're all going to rush back out again, and they're going to go to the next hot thing, right? Whatever the next hot thing is, they'll run after that, right?
Yeah, I see the same thing in residential, right? Burr was a thing for a while. It could do no wrong. Airbnb arbitrage, where you're basically, subleasing properties and get no money down. It's just like, gosh, this is going to hurt so many people.
Don't build your business on a house of cards, right?
Yes.
Like don't build your business on a house of cards. Build it on a solid foundation.
It's always the debt. That's always the debt that'll get you.
The debt, or if you're talking about like Airbnb arbitrage, it's like it's a different form of debt. Like your lease, you can look at it as a form of debt, right?
It's certainly a liability. Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly a liability. And if you can't service it, then with new people coming in, then you're screwed.
Yeah,
so
you're screwed. Yeah.
Be cautious, folks.
Yeah.
But
folks, you've been helping people. You have a brand new Facebook group that's launching, ready. I think it's a great time to relaunch a Facebook group focused on multifamily because it's doers and operators and people really looking to understand and take action. Let us know what that Facebook group is again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks for reminding me of that. So the new Facebook group is called Apartment Investors Club, same as my podcast. And just go to Facebook and sign up. And you will, when you get there, there's a section called guides. And in the guide section, there is a free video series for you about how to sort of what a syndication really is, and then how to raise money, how to get good deals, and how to the proper mindset for an investor. So I'll be adding to those guides over time, but that's in there for you to see for free, and I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, folks. And again, remember, Jonathan has a playlist on this channel, probably with certainly hundreds of hours there. It's a lot of wealth and knowledge you've been giving us for the last couple of years. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael.